right, we are live. It is the end of the school year. There's a lot to celebrate, and I'm sure you got the energy for the most important conversation of the year. That's right. We are here, the Learner Center Collaborative, our last webinar of the school year, and we've got a treat for you. We are diving into a pretty special topic, the future of assessment and reporting. We're going to dive into some examples of competency-based approaches. We've got some featured experts that we've convened from all over the country to offer you today, and we're excited to jump into some conversation. But before we get started in true learner-centered fashion, some connection before content. So if you could drop in the chat for us who you are, where you're from, what you do, we'll get a chance to connect with you before we kick off here. For our guests who are featured speakers, as folks get logged in here, if you want to drop that same information in on the chat, maybe give some shout outs to some folks that you're connected with as they jump in. I see Bobby Ann from Deer Lakes. Bobby Ann, one of my favorite people in the whole world. Bobby Ann's a super, super amazing dynamite leader in Deer Lakes up in the Pennsylvania area. Thanks for joining us, Bobby Ann. Hope you have a great summer. Let's see who else we've got joining us today. Let's check this list. See if we can shout a few folks out. My man, Corey Steiner, in the building. Corey's a beautiful mind. If you want to steal some thoughts from someone who just gets it, Corey would definitely be somebody to think about. To our guests who are on the call right now, let's start with some introductions so we know our featured speakers who are joining us today. I'm going to pass to one of my favorite teammates at Learner Center Collaborative, somebody get a chance to collaborate very often. Brianna, if you could introduce yourselves and get us started here in the webinar today. Thanks for being here, Brianna.
Thanks, Marlon, for launching us with such great energy. I'm excited to be here with everyone. Brianna Hansen. I'm located in Napa, California. I'm with Learner Centered Collaborative, Director of Learning Design, former Spanish teacher in high school, middle school, and elementary. And I'm excited to be here and share a little bit about what we've been working on. I'm going to pass it over to the Mineola team to say hi.
Hi, I'm Katie Shanahan. I am an elementary principal at Mineola School District on Long Island. Prior to that role, I was an assistant principal at the Mineola Middle School. And prior to that role, I was a district instructional leader.
Hi, I am Jen Machen. I am currently the assistant principal at Mineola High School. Helped to build what you'll learn later is synergy at Mineola High School, which is our concept and our prototype of the future of high school. Prior to that, I was a district instructional leader in Mineola, and prior to that, I was a special educator in Mineola for 25 years. So I started my journey teaching in Mineola, and I have never left.
All right, I'll jump in and introduce myself. My name's Chad Carlson. I'm the Director of Research and Design over at One Stone in Boise, Idaho. I am the co-founder of Lab 51, our micro school, day school. Excited to be part of this conversation. I've got about 25 years of experience in education and fired up about transforming the learner experience. Been with One Stone since 2016, and it's just been nothing but creativity and play and redesigning everything. And so we've got license to really explore and do what's right for learners. So excited to share our experience with everybody in the audience today.
All right, we got some beautiful minds on the call today. I want to frame the conversation up for you. There's some great work happening that Brianna's led around a competency-based assessment playbook. We're going to dive into that here in just a second. We're going to have a featured session here with our panelists. We're going to ask them some questions to get some of their concepts, their examples out to offer you in the field. And then we're going to do something different. We're actually going to pause the webinar. We're going to open up 2 different breakout rooms based on topics. So as you're hearing our panelists share some different concepts throughout the conversation, we're going to give you a chance to go in a topic-based breakout room of interest. That way you can get a little more intimate with our speakers and our practice, maybe steal some of their models and their strategies, ask some more pointed questions in those breakout rooms. Again, this is all about you here. After the breakout sessions, we'll come back as a whole group, and Brianna's going to close us out with some closing comments. So we got a jam-packed agenda. We're going to pause on the rest of the introductions, just get right down to business. Brianna, can you just take a few moments and just kind of set the stage for us and calibrate us around some of the work and maybe an overview of the playbook that you recently created?
Yeah, so we at Learner Centered Collaborative have been working for a long time with schools and districts on designing learner-centered learning experiences that we define as authentic, personalized, competency-based, equitable, and inclusive, and then creating the enabling conditions that support systems and really bringing those learning experiences to life. And something that we've often found is that traditional grading practices are one of those enabling conditions that can really be in conflict and in tension with all these great learner-centered practices. And so we set out on this research project that we're calling the competency-based reporting playbook to really find out how are different systems really thinking about redesigning assessment, grading, and reporting structures away from those traditional points on assignments, percentages. And so we found a really wide variety of approaches to really thinking about this question, but a lot of similarities as well. And so we're really looking forward to publishing this playbook in June. So everyone here that's joining us for the webinar will get kind of an early sneak peek of that. You should look out for that in your email. Both Mineola and One Stone will be featured in that playbook, along with over 20 other schools and systems that are really thinking about things in a lot of different ways. And what we really wanted to ask is, how did you design this structure? What were the questions that you really had to grapple with? And we found that schools and systems were really grappling with the similar questions, but they answered them in a really wide variety of ways. And so the point of the playbook is to really help you think about those questions, like what are the outcomes that we're going to assess? And this is really where there's distinctions between standards and competencies and the grain size of what you're assessing. Then we're thinking about how are you assessing them? What is kind of your thought on scales of proficiency and how are you marking progress? What does the actual assessment process look like? Then when you think about taking all that assessment, how do you summarize it and report it out? Is another question that every system has kind of had to grapple with. And the final one being, especially for the upper grades going into university applications, is thinking about transcripting and credentialing needs. And so there's also a variety of approaches that you'll hear about today, and also even more in the playbook around how systems are thinking about taking those new reporting structures, but still having to kind of live in another world and report those out, either translating them back to traditional transcripts or thinking about really new and innovative ways to show transcript and credentialing. So it's really exciting to be able to talk and learn with all of these leaders. I'm really excited for you to hear today from three of those here in this room, and hope that you will check out the playbook in June and learn a lot more about what other systems are doing and how it can help you in your system.
Fantastic stuff. If our panelists, if you don't mind, if I just scratch my head real quick, I legit have a scratch on my forehead. It's not a sign, doesn't mean anything. It's a legit scratch. I'm just gonna get it one more time before we get into our so let's pull some content from you, right? Let's get a chance to share some learning space from you. Chad, I'm gonna toss this out to you, but I would love to hear from all four of our panelists here. Chad, if you could kick us off with a response. You know, the topic of assessment, you know, it's on the minds of many educators across the whole country. In your mind as a panel, why is it so important that we shift away from traditional assessment practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, traditional assessment practices is kind of a general term, but I think what we're really thinking about test-based assessment, whatever those tests are, if they're essays, multiple choice, you know, your traditional types of assessment, and we really at One Stone have moved toward finding authentic ways to assess students and their skills and what they can do. But you know, we're big on real-world learning, on personalized learning. And traditional assessments can't measure those. They can't really do a whole lot for you. And I think the flaw around traditional assessment is it's so focused on, I don't want to say content or knowledge memorization, but it really is. And it's got limited application. And we really feel that our heart of hearts is that students need to be given the opportunity to apply their learning, show and demonstrate what they can do and what they can do with that learning, and find new and innovative ways to share that. And so personalization allows us to take different approaches to assessing students, allowing them to use their strengths to demonstrate what they can do. I think moving into the world that we're in with a host of global problems, social challenges, whatever it might be, traditional assessment just doesn't help students learn. And assessment really should be based on helping students learn, not just measuring student learning.
Chad, I agree. I think that if we open up with a question, like what are the outcomes? What do we actually want them to be able to know, understand, and do? Sometimes when we stick to traditional grading or traditional tests, we don't go up with OK or Bloom. And it's easier to be able to create a test based on the knowledge or the lower levels of identifying and describing. And even though we strive to meet those standards, which include the verbs of evaluate and justify, we don't really get there because we kind of get stuck in the testing part. And so if we really answer the question, what do we want them to learn, be able to do? Maybe we can say, okay, so what does that look like? And then we can open our minds to what assessment can be and go outside of thinking about a traditional grading system.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
kind of to add on to what you both are saying too, I'm hearing this sort of theme of like being a part of the process. So we've really shifted assessment to be sort of a summative idea or sort of a cumulative idea or some sort of final autopsy, for lack of a better word, to really embedding it in the process of learning. And you had mentioned, Chad, like this assessment for learning idea, right? So when we're talking about competency-based learning and our proficiency scale work, at least I'm speaking from an elementary perspective, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, we're really trying to develop a self-awareness around assessment as learning and develop a real participation in assessment and looking at evidence of learning. We've kind of shifted our language from away from assessment towards evidence of learning, and that being our way of starting to create a culture where students are a part of the assessment process, where they're participating in it and reflecting on it and setting goals and coming up with an action plan. So that's really been sort of assessment shift here, is not only in the content of assessment, but also the process of assessment.
And we've learned if we're really, really clear on our outcomes and we're clear and the students, the learners are clear on what the outcome is, then we can ask them, how are you going to demonstrate evidence that you know or understand or can do these things? And then assessment becomes wide open. But it's the clarity before that of the outcome, which is a proficiency scale or a competency, that drives the opportunity to envision different types of assessment.
Well, and I love that change of language that you mentioned around evidence of learning. And that idea of evidence of learning is that, students can present different forms of evidence. And so that idea of truly personalized learning and personalized demonstration of ability, I think it really lends itself a lot greater to equity in learning, that students have different ways of showing their learning and what they can do. And what they want to do with that learning. And so whether you're in elementary, middle, or high school, I really think that idea of evidence of learning, so students can understand that they're bringing this thing with them to showcase, like, this is what I can do, and how exciting that is, as opposed to we're all doing the same thing, which, a lot of learners learn how to kind of work with the system, but there are too many that we know just don't. And I think we're losing students when we focus on traditional assessment practices that just focus on a narrow definition of what does learning look like? What is that evidence of learning?
Yeah,
Maybe it'll save time for teachers too. Sorry, we'll save time for teachers, and they don't have to sit in their living rooms all weekend to come up with a project, because they just have to ask the kid what it's going to look like, and then go on that journey with them of building it.
Right. That's really hard though for a lot of teachers. I was going to
Yes,
say,
it is.
and I think for a lot of leaders out there in the audience today, that is the big challenge. Like, how do we help educators? How do we help teachers, the people that are in the classroom with kids every day, make that change in approach? Because it can seem overwhelming. And I think once you start doing it and you kind of venture out and you start practicing it, it is, I don't want to say easier, because there's nothing easy about teaching and learning and education. But it's a refreshing shift for sure.
I think what I hear you all talking about is really this essential shift that is from traditional practices, which are really about giving points and percentages on assignments and then kind of like averaging them all up into a grade book is kind of this traditional approach that I know I went to school through, I taught in, and we've kind of all experienced and culturally are aware of in the United States, to this real shift that is assignments or assessments are opportunities to show evidence towards outcomes. And that seems like maybe this like semantic shift, but it's actually a huge paradigm shift away from what we have traditionally known as assessment and what it looks like. And then how do you really think about showing how students are doing, what are their strengths, and how can they improve? That really becomes the goal of reporting, rather than, like you said, just kind of being what was the term you used, Katie? Like
like an autopsy.
yeah, just this kind of like useless document. I think both of your systems that we'll kind of dive into now are really about assessment for learning, but even your reporting and your kind of grading structures, if you will, are really about that and designed around that. And I think that's meaningful.
I always
Wow.
get stuck in traditional assessments and our traditional report cards in a secondary school where there's like 10% is participation.
Yes.
And that it never made sense to me because it's so subjective and there's no evidence of that based on, I'll just give the extra points if there, but if we remove that and really say, did you demonstrate this, that this, and this, then participation is another competency, right? So that's assessed next to the academic standards.
Right.
We
And
can dive
participation.
in.
Oh,
If you don't
sorry.
mind, if we can dive into your systems. Again, I heard the term refreshing, and this is a refreshing conversation. But I want to ask both Mineola, Katie, and Jen, and then also Chad at once. And I'm also Alfred, the same question. If we have Katie and Jen jump in first, and then Chad will go with you after they respond. But for our viewers, can you talk to us and maybe just give us some insights, maybe share what does this look like in your school community and in your organization? Are there any impactful practices or examples that you could share with us? And if there's any additional resources you could direct us to as well, I'd be happy to share that with our participants too.
Sure. Brianna mentioned the word how granular we can get. We can get real granular. So we'll try not to go there, but we will try to. I will try to give enough to give insight to see how practical it can be, because we can often talk about kind of big picture ideas, but really the practicality is what everyone kind of wants to walk away with. So at Mineola, I'll speak from the elementary, middle school, and even the high school perspective. We did sit down as a team and we looked at all of our state and national standards that our expectations for all of our learners as far as the clarity of outcomes. And we created a proficiency scale system for not just each individual standard. We clustered some together that made the most sense, but we created a proficiency scale book, or for lack of a better word, for each grade level. And that really laid out the expectations as far as, what's the scale, the levels of learning, the levels of outcome that we want learners to go through for the entire year. So by the end of the year, this is the expectation, but along the way, that process along the way, how are we going to get the learners there, and how are we going to communicate that very clearly? One of our tenets here at Mineola is visible learning. So how are we going to really make the journey to the outcome at the end of the year? We want all of our learners to be able to do, be this way or know this. How do we make that visible? And then from there, really tying that into curriculum and instruction. As an instructional leader and then as a building leader, that was paramount. We really wanted to make sure that this proficiency scale was a living, breathing, integrated system that was a part of how we not only assess or how we demonstrate evidence of learning, but how we teach, how we communicate, how learners advocate, how they reflect, how they goal set, because they're constantly referring back to the journey. Where am I on this proficiency scale? Where do I need to go? How will I get there? And what do I have already to show my evidence of proficiency? So we did a lot of work collectively as a team, district-wide, building-wide, integrating our proficiency scales within the units of study that we already have. And then from there, structurally speaking, we were saying it's a shift, right? It's a shift for teachers just conceptually, but it's also a shift in practice. So how do we design classroom spaces where these proficiency scales live daily or live, on a regular basis? And that can't look like lectures or top-down approach. It has to be something where learners are interacting with the proficiency scales, either through advocating for conferencing or deliberate practice on skills skills that they haven't yet mastered, but know that they need to work on, or collaborative projects that they want to design together to demonstrate their evidence of learning for a skill or competency that they know they need to reach. So that took a shift in professional learning as far as supporting teachers with redesigning the classroom space and the instructional structure practices to support the proficiency scale work. So it became a living, breathing document that was embedded into all of our worlds, and not something that was extra out there.
And so when we designed that, we designed it for the elementary school, but then we also designed a prototype for the future of high school and how we saw the future of high school, which we called Synergy at Mineola High School, which is it was a choice prototype in which kids said, okay, I want to learn this way. And we designed proficiency scales for the high school content. In school in New York State, we have Regents exams that we have to take, which are New York State exams at the end of most of our content. So we had to design things that would lead to real assessments if we created them in the same exact model in a pure competency-based fashion. And we removed bells, we removed periods, we removed the walls, and we created a space, kind of, I always think of it like Google or Starbucks, where there's like rooms that you can rent out. And a lot of our content is online, so kids can get that knowledge level on their own. And then twice a week, they go to seminars, just like they do in college, where they get the teacher student feedback. And then they have workshops, and the teachers have office hours in which the kids learned how to manage their own time, choose and prioritize their content area that they want to be able to address first, and then access and advocate for themselves when they need help or feedback. So the proficiency scales, in the same vein as they do in the 3rd and 4th grade, lead everything, because that document is exactly what you have to be able to show evidence of that you understand or can do. So even on the secondary level, where it's so much more content heavy, where it's so much more, the stakes are much higher, we've been able to take this, use this prototype, which we are now in our 3rd year and shifting towards the traditional high school model. And we're starting to shift what we've learned with those proficiency scales to teach teachers, and they're starting to see that. So once again, in New York, where it's very hard to do this because of there's a lot of constraints with the state, we're seeing a lot of progress, and it's really, really driven by clear proficiency scales that are made with a pure competency-based approach.
And Jen, could you speak just for a moment? I know Marlon was going to jump in, but just a kind of follow-up question. Could you speak a little bit to how those proficiency scales kind of support students in receiving a kind of traditional grade? We talked about that, like they're getting feedback on their proficiency scales, but then how does that translate to their transcript? Maybe.
Yeah, so if you think of it as a 4-point proficiency scale, and there's 4 levels, we removed the numbers from the levels, and we call the levels insight is the 1st level, and then knowledge is the 2nd level, and then application is the 3rd level, and then transfer is the 4th level. So mathematically, in competency-based, the knowledge level is all the stuff that you need to be able to understand the skill, the vocabulary, the low-level webs and Bloom's taxonomy that you need to be able to know in order to reach the application level, which really is a student-friendly version of what the standard is for that content area. So we teach the kids how to access that knowledge level, and like how to take notes, how to, a lot of the executive functioning building happens within metacognition, happens within that knowledge level, and so that they can demonstrate evidence on the application level. But when mathematically, what we've learned, because we cannot be a true competency-based reporting system, we use what's called rolling grades. So say there is 11 proficiency scales that make up an entire course, the students are allowed to pace themselves. So truly, if you demonstrate evidence of application, by December, then you've passed that course, then you've met the requirements for that course. And the application level right now is the 100, because that's what you were able to demonstrate. And then the knowledge level, when it comes down to it, we do a 1, 2, 3, 4 system, turns into, if you complete all of 11 scales, and that means you get the knowledge, you get a 2 for each one, divided by the total number, it becomes a 66. So it really works out perfectly, because you can get anywhere in between a 66, which is if you do the basics, which is not meeting the standard, but it's doing the basic stuff. And then you demonstrate application of that knowledge, you can get up to 100, but you have the entire year to do that. So we report the percent of proficiency of the scales, or the proficiency scales that you addressed already through the first through third quarters. And then the final quarter is your final grade. So you had the entire year to be able to keep working up, but those grades in your first quarter grade, when you get to your second quarter report card, that first quarter grade isn't there anymore, because you have the ability to raise it. It's just kind of a benchmark. So we kind of know where you are, and it's clear to parents and kids where they are, but they can always go back and work on any scale throughout the year, throughout the course. So it works really well right now. We're in the process of trying to report it in an easier way, but
I know it,
mathematically, the kids know it. Everything's very clear and visible.
we don't use the word transcript, obviously, at my level, but there is a very present conversation around clarity around, is my kid where they're supposed to be, right? How do I know that at this point of the year, this is where they're supposed to be? Are they okay? That's kind of, that's really the snapshot that the families that at the elementary levels want to know for whatever, conceptual reason. Getting a 2 on a report card kind of gave that answer, but now they're getting, your child is at knowledge, or your child is at application, and there's a little discomfort with that. So we had to grapple with similar but different, but over, clarity and transparency was similar, and we did that through controlling pacing. So what is communicated to the families is that where is your child expected to be on the proficiency scale at this point of the year, based on what was taught and based on what they had opportunities to deliberately practice, versus where they actually are, and almost giving like a T-chart comparison. They're expected to be at, let's say, knowledge, and they're at insight. Okay, that's something that a family would then say, why, what's going on? Or they're expected to be at application and have, completed the proficiency scale, like Jen was mentioning, but they're only at knowledge. So just that came a couple of years to come around to that, because originally our reporting transcript was just there, the level, and that left a lot of questions to the families about, anxiety around, well, is that okay? And what do I do with that? And so this was our answer. It's not perfect. We're still thinking about it, reflecting on it. Because it's hard for the community in general to let go of numbers, even though the numbers really don't mean much when you explain to them, well, what does a 2 mean? What does a 3 mean? Whereas knowledge, as a parent or as a community member, knowledge means they've demonstrated evidence for all of these skills that are listed in the knowledge level, but we're still at the point of educating and shifting that mindset, which is, I think, still a process.
I appreciate all the great knowledge. Again, to our guests, we're going to be breakout sessions here in just a few moments. We're some amazing things from Mineola. So some things that are really capturing your attention, definitely a breakout room we want you to consider. Chad, I want to bring you in for the same conversation and kind of just talk about what's happening at One Stone, and just talk to us about what it sounds, looks, feels like, or any impactful practices or examples that you would want to share for our guests as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we went about designing Lab 51, One Stone's high school, we really kind of had a couple things in mind that we wanted to address. And we knew from both research and from our anecdotal experience working with students in after school programs that learning for students was really, especially for high school students, lacking in relevance and lacking in meaning. And so everything we designed was based on providing opportunities for learning to be relevant and meaningful for students. And that goes for assessment as well. And so when we built out our assessment system that we call the growth transcript, We wanted to make sure that it was a relevant way to measure skills and what students can do, and then it was meaningful. So meaningful in a way that students could look back, could reflect, could own, like, this is actually who I am. This represents what I can do, and set goals based on where they are and where they want to go. And so we've got a growth progression scale that really goes from emerging and developing all the way into advancing and mastering. It's actually a seven level scale. We deliberately stayed away from anything that could be converted to GPA or A's and B's, because we wanted students to begin thinking about learning and their assessment completely differently. We designed the growth transcript with students alongside them. So we got a lot of feedback from them and from their parents and whatnot. And we found that in the measurement of competencies or skills, there are really three domains that are really important for us. One is the level of sophistication or complexity in which a student can apply the skill. So looking at the actual application. Two, we're looking at the context in which they apply the skill. So we're looking at various different contexts that can be from professional in the community to, more familiar contexts in school, et cetera. And the third, we're looking at the level of agency in which students are applying the skill. Are they applying the skill because they were asked to, because that's something that's part of what they're doing, or is this something that they're just doing naturally based on their comfort and understanding and ability to apply the skill? So taking this kind of complex approach, we also decided that it was best to take a look at these competencies across the curriculum, as opposed to what does critical thinking in the social sciences look like, and what does it look like in their after-school experience with experiential service. We thought, well, critical thinking is happening across the curriculum outside of the school. And so students will get various different assessments from across the curriculum from different people in the same competency and skill. And that actually is aggregated over time. And so students have, depending on how long they're at the school for, 4 years to develop proficiency, or we call that level actualizing. And so, our idea behind actualizing or proficiency is that students are college and career ready. And so we've got a rather kind of high bar for proficiency, and understanding that students might be in the program for 2 or 3 years before they actually hit proficiency. And they can see their growth over time. And so, as far as examples, I mean, we've got students doing a lot of human-centered design work in the community with community partners. And they're developing their skills in communication. So real-world communication, whether that's developing proper email etiquette and how to address, community partners, to presentation and pitching, et cetera. Giving them as many opportunities to apply their skills in real world or authentic context as possible, but also giving them opportunities to practice those skills in-house as often as possible, so that they develop a comfort and get a lot of feedback along the way. And so for us, that idea of feedback and practice along the way with lots of reflection is extremely important for our students. And I heard a ping, so I'm going to just kind of stop there because I think we're supposed to shift.
I think the ping is like when you say that one smart thing, right? It's like a virtual head nod. You know what I mean? So Chad, you got your one ping of the day. So you're leading 1-0. I'm sure there's some other virtual pings out there, some virtual head nods.
I hope we recorded this.
Shame on, Chad.
My one smart thing. I'm out. Bye, everybody.
Well, thank you guys for just sharing some context and just letting us get a small dose of a peek into your practices here. Again, Bobby, and I agree with you. Just love that. Love the conversation. For our participants, we're going to shift to breakout rooms right now. We're going to give you a chance to spend some time with One Stone, spend some time with Mineola, and just go into some deeper dialogue. We want this session to not be just about our featured speakers, but about you as participants. So come with your questions. Let your curiosities ring out. Pick their brains, ask them for resources, steal any of their thoughts. We're going to open breakout rooms for a 15-minute window. At the conclusion of the breakout, we'll come back here as a whole group in the main room, and then we're going to close out with Brianna and dig a little bit more into that playbook that she dropped a little teaser about earlier in the webinar. So this time we'll open up those 2 breakout rooms. We got breakout room number 1. You'll be able to choose for One Stone. Breakout room number 2 will be for Mineola. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
Thanks, Marlon.
Kevin smart things.
I'm not
Yes,
that smart.
Do I sense extra innings? What are we doing here?
Yeah, no, don't put numbers on that, Marlon.
We got OT. I was waiting for you to pick up on the number piece. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the breakout sessions with our featured panelists from One Stone and Mineola, two dynamic school systems doing some amazing things for kids. Glad you had a chance to just pick their brains a little more in depth. As we come to a close here, I would like to draw the attention back to you, Brianna, not to put pressure on you, but we'll give you a chance to get on the virtual head nod board as well. Brianna, if you just want to dig into this competency-based assessment playbook that you mentioned early in the webinar, and I want you to take a few moments, if you don't mind, to talk to us about the impact you see it having on the field. And then I believe you've got a little teaser you want to offer our guests in the webinar as well today for their attendance. So I'm gonna let you take it from here and talk about the playbook a little bit.
Yeah, so thanks, Katie, Jen, and Chad for sharing about your structures. I think it's, a great insight. And I heard in a lot of the breakout rooms some nitty-gritty questions about design and also some really big picture questions around implementation. The design around the playbook was really to get to the heart of the design and get into the nitty-gritty. Katie mentioned like how granular do you want to get? The playbook's going to get really granular. So if you want more details around both of these structures, you'll get a lot of those in the playbook. But really to be thinking about how do you want to design the structure, because a lot of those questions around implementation, I heard things like, how does this affect your schedule? How do you get parents on board? What did you do with teachers to help support them? You can't do any of that if you don't understand the structure. If we're just saying we're going to move away from X and we don't know what Y is, no one's going to go to Y with you. And so the idea of this kind of first round of the playbook was really to open the black box of the Y, and like not WHY, but the other option of what reporting structures can look like, and really open that up and be concrete around what it looks like in Mineola, what does it look like in One Stone, and what does it look like in these other systems, and how can it look in your system. And then we're hoping for kind of a future iteration to really be around implementation and what are all the other puzzle pieces that kind of go into this. So really excited to share that with you. In a few months, you'll get more details around Mineola's system as well as One Stone's system. Like Marlon says, for joining us today, we are going to give you some early access to that. So you will have an email in just a few weeks that gives you that access to that playbook before anyone else this summer. And we look forward to hearing your feedback and hearing from you around your questions. What are we missing in the playbook? What can we continue to add to it? And who else should we continue to talk to? Because there's a plethora of people out there who are doing this work in a really inspiring way. We've talked to a handful of them for this playbook, a big handful of them, but we'd love to continue to connect with more people. So looking forward to you being able to see it, learn more from these great leaders in that playbook, and then also to join us in the conversation and share your learning with us as well.
Brown, I have to ask. So I thought I heard you say they get something special for attending today. Could you say that again for our guests? They get what?
Yeah, you will get early access, which people have been emailing us about. So you get it, and you get to see it first. And Marlon did also ask around the impact that we hope this has. I mean, my hope is that more schools and systems will want to do what Mineola and One Stone are doing, and what many of you on this call are doing. But I also hope that even for the Mineolas and the One Stones and everyone else to read about what other people are doing and to be able to say, oh, how do I want to tweak our system? Katie and Jen mentioned, like, we're always trying to iterate and we're always trying to find a more efficient and a better way. And so to like open this up and create a community where people are sharing what they're really doing, what it looks like, and what the challenges and bright spots are, can really help us all grow and continue to kind of evolve this very new and emergent. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but it's also really emergent. And to really think about what it can look like to move towards a new competency-based approach to assessment, grading in quotations, and reporting structures. So.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Katie, Jen, Chad, and my teammate Brianna and Ashley behind the scenes. Thank you guys for carving time out to be featured speakers on the webinar for Learner Center Collaborative. To all of our guests who joined us, thanks for sharing the learning space with us to talk about this important topic around how we can change the game around assessment practices for the learners in our school communities. On behalf of the Learner Center Collaborative team, please be on the lookout for emails from us to give you early access to the playbook that Brianna mentioned before, but also a recorded link for today's conversation. That way you can slow it down and pull some of those virtual head nod gems that were dropped throughout the webinar. As you close out the school year, please just take a moment and pause, enjoy all the end of the year celebrations with your staff, your colleagues, your learners, and your community. On behalf of the team at Learner Center Collaborative, we want to thank you for your service and everything you've done for the kids this year. Have a great summer. Thanks for joining us, and be on the lookout for some emails. Take care, everyone.